Well, good morning, all. I'm really pleased to see you come and attend the meeting and get to see my good friend Mab. She's such a spark plug that I sometimes kind of wonder how she gets so much energy to go out and about. I couldn't match all that she does and what she does for our community. I'm really thankful and I acknowledge all her efforts and good thoughts for our community. And I call this our community because even though Rosarito became a city of its own a while ago, it used to be part of Tijuana. So this is part of my stomping grounds in a way. I say that respectfully, of course. And well, my name is Rafael Solorzano. I'm from Tijuana. I'm 62 years of age. Whippersnapper, someone said. I'll accept that. I kind of feel that way somehow, you know. And I was born and raised in Tijuana. I consider myself to be bilingual, pretty much since the age of 9, and I don't have formal education in the U.S., therefore, bear with me, English is not my native tongue. I do as best as I can. I just want to drive my message across, and I'm really passionate about what I do. I love Tijuana with all its good, bad, and nasty ways. I travel all over the peninsula. I visit Todos Santos and Cabo at least once a month, you know. I have more clients down there than I have here. It appears that I'm better known down there than here, and it's not out of neglect out of my part, because surely I don't get to be in public places. Not that I shy away from conversations. I don't have a problem with addressing and meeting people and looking them in the eye and you know, making friends. But I wanted to, when I was a kid, born in 57, all I looked at, and I was surrounded and bombarded by American culture. And when I would go to school, I'd be back at home by midday. I would do my homework and I would watch TV. You know, I would watch Dr. Kilder, Father Knows Best. What was that show? Love Joan? I forgot. You know, it's way back from the 50s, and you know, everything I saw was American culture. I myself felt that I was an American at some time, and yeah, I'm part of the continent, but I was not born in the U.S. But I was taught different. My dad was a military man. He taught me about accountability. He taught me about discipline, about respect, about manners, about fighting for my freedoms. Something that unfortunately a lot of my countrymen don't actually understand. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to my countrymen, but unfortunately that is a very distinguishing mark between the U.S. and Mexico and countries south of Mexico. And it seems that system somehow erode that and taken away from the Constitution the right for people not only to express themselves, but actually fight for their freedoms. Americans are very keen about it. Americans could try to take anything from you, but you will not allow it because it's not the American way. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to pass that on to many away from my household, but in my family, we do stand for our principles. We do fight for our way of life. We do fight for a way to express ourselves, but we do know what accountability means. Unfortunately, that is not something that is driven as important as it is for every household, for every individual in our country. I wish that could change. When I was in high school, we had a subject which was civismo, civic values. That's been taken away. Why, I don't know. But it pretty much shows the way that our nation, our cities, our states behave. They lost respect to each other. But I'm not going to get into the nasty things. I'm just trying to express myself as to what is it that drives me, what motivates me, what keeps my engine going. I've done many things. You know, when I graduated from law school, I became an HR manager for a transport company. And I was 22. You know, I was facing people who were twice my age, and they had weapons on them because they'd be moving money around in town. You know, I had to fire them. Sometimes I had to recruit them, so I had to stand my ground and be respectful anyway. With time, Banco Nacional Mexico hires me to become their delegado fiduciario, which is the guy in charge of Fideicomisos. And my professional thesis happens to be the study of the Mexican trust. So what is it that I do? 90% of my clients actually come to me for real estate property issues, Fideicomisos, okay? So I then learned by watching someone else do it. I studied this for 2 years. I was 3 years with the bank. I managed Fideicomisos, not just real estate type, but investment, corporate trust, you name it. But was in the U.S. I resided there 6 years. I was a foreign legal consultant, licensed by the Cal Bar. And boy, it was expensive. $10,000 annual insurance for faults and omissions. Something that Mexico probably may not ever see, but everyone is like by themselves when it comes to hiring an attorney. So we go like, oh, Mexican attorneys. Oh, okay, but you don't know what you're going to get. So with time, I felt that, well, I'm always curious, but I'm not the smartest person in this world because, you know, it's just too many fields. How can I be accountable and just take any case because I just want the money? I had to specialize in something, so I specialize in what I'm going to address today. Real estate property issues, landlord-tenant issues, okay? I do touch other areas such as estate planning. I talk about the bounce directives. I talk about wills, about guardianship, which is something that I want to address when I'm invited by the United Association of Baja California to, as I promised, an offer to do that when the opportunity shows up. But that's not going to be a topic today unless there's time if people want to address that. So, but today I want to address something that it concerns me, that I'm so passionate about, which is real estate property, real estate laws. And I would like to start out by saying, why do we have a fideicomiso? Why do we still have a fideicomiso? Okay. Mexico's relationship with the U.S. hasn't always been the steadiest. It's been bumpy, and it is always bumpy because it's not up to us, the people. It's up to the politicians that mess things up, okay? And I deal with politicians, and I don't see eye to eye with them because I was a public servant at once, and I was head of the Economic Development Committee for the city of Tijuana for 3 years. So I promoted my country, promoted my state and my city. And I've seen how difficult things can be when they have their own agenda and it's not for the better of the people. But okay, Mexico has had its differences with the U.S. The 1824 Revolution of Texas was not a war between the U.S. and Mexico. It was a revolution. People eventually felt that they wanted to go a different way. So, okay, they separated, and with time, Texas became annexed to the U.S. They decided to do that. But the 1846-1848 war pretty much marked what Mexico and the U.S. is, because Mexico lost a huge chunk of its territory, and it is the way it is today. With time, there were other conflicts in which Mexico had the U.S. fleet right smack in front of their base. Loreto, they call it La Heroica Loreto because they fought off the Americans, eventually Americans, to control the town, as they did with major ports like La Paz. And eventually, time passes, but Mexico's, particularly politicians, are remorseful. They're still upset and embittered, and they said, well, we don't want that anymore. We'll prohibit Americans or any foreigner from actually owning property along the borders and the coast, which are the most fragile areas of our country, because that's how they come into our country before there was any airplanes and all that. So in the Constitution of Mexico, Article 27, it's quite lengthy, but I will simply address this part. It says, in Mexico, under no circumstances, a foreigner will be able to own directly property along the borders and coasts. The purpose is explained right below that. So it was pretty much a buffer zone that they wanted to create, okay, to minimize the risk of being invaded again, okay, by having sellers such as in the case of Texas. But it was more than that. So All the way up to 1973, people could not legally buy property along the borders and coasts, and they call that zona prohibida, which is basically a constitutional restriction of 100 kilometers from the coast and 50 kilometers from the borders. Along with time, Mexico decided for all practical purposes that the whole peninsula of Baja California, which was always looked at as a bounty or a way to colonize by outer settlers, they said, let's just ban the whole peninsula of Baja California because there's gaps in the middle that are within that 100 kilometers, so let's just ban it all. Okay. So in 1973, Mexican President Echeverria reformed the foreign investment law to allow the use and enjoyment of property along the zona prohibida. We're actually talking semantics here, because what does the Constitution say? Direct domain, dominio directo. The odd thing is that the Constitution does specify that the direct domain of property in Mexico is owned by the nation. The nation is represented by a government. So neither of us, Mexican or not, do have actually direct domain. So we have what? Use and enjoyment. Because the government can take over property and expropriate, okay, and then use that for the better of the people, if they want to. So we're talking semantics. So 73, the Fideicomiso is enacted and allows the use and enjoyment of property along the zona prohibida under a real estate trust. So they figure, well, let's have a banking institution that has the solvency, the assets to respond and be able to hold property on behalf of the buyer. So the seller of the property, either a corporation or a Mexican individual, sells the property to another individual, and that individual happens to be a foreigner. So the government says, okay, we'll give you a permit. Every time you have to set up a Fideicomiso, we'll give you a permit, and this is what you can do and this is what you cannot do. You have 30 years, and you can renew before the expiration of the 30 years. So they have the bank assume responsibility, so you hold trust, you hold the deed on behalf of these people. Consider that as a tutorship, okay? When you have a tutor, you can do pretty much everything. You have to do it through who? The tutor, right? So he's liable, he's responsible, he's legally capable, but to do things only on your behalf under a particular specific set of guidelines. So the Fideicomiso allows you to do what? To buy, to use, to lease, to encumber, to bequeath, to do pretty much everything and anything legal, which would be the same as I, as a Mexican, be able to do by myself. But I cannot sell property myself if I don't go to a notario. So either way, foreigners and Mexicans have to pretty much formalize the same set of documentation. The only difference is that the bank is always in the middle having to do this. So since 73, all Fideicomisos were 30 years. Before 2002, I believe it was 2000 already, Congress was involved in the idea of what should we do? We're coming to the end of the Fideicomisos. I was managing Fideicomisos in, to those familiar with Cabo San Lucas and El Pedregal, I was personally responsible for El Pedregal when I was with Banco Nacional de Mexico, among other large Fideicomisos. Those were master trusts. And what later on, if we have the time, and I still have a voice, do remind me as to addressing what is the difference between a master trust and an individual trust, because there's a marked difference. There's still a few of them around. So the Fideicomiso eventually was reformed, and the government consented to extending it to 50 years instead of keeping it at 30 years. So those, there's still a few people now that haven't looked at their old trust, and they haven't found out that their Fideicomiso has expired. And I have renewed a few of them, and it's cost, oh boy, I should have built them twice what I built them, because it took me 18 months to get them. And HSBC is absolutely horrible. Banorte is pitiful. Bancomer is, I don't know what to say. I always get in trouble, and they seem to charge me a quota for being so open about it. But anyways, the Fideicomisos are now 50 years. And why do we have a Fideicomiso? Why do we still have a Fideicomiso? International relations, politicians. It's not us, the people. It's them fighting over particular interest, corporate greed, whatever you want to call it, power. So the Fideicomiso may remain for a while. I believe it's irrational. I believe it's backward. I believe that the Fideicomiso is absolutely unnecessary, because we're still bound by the same rules, we're still bound by the same laws, we're still bound to face the same consequences, regardless of your origin. You're residents of the country, you're investors in the country, so why not bound people to the same conditions we as Mexicans? It's just a political way for them to assume that they have control and power, but it's absolutely outdated. There was a push to do without the Fideicomiso before the energy laws were actually the focus during Peña Nieto's administration. Unfortunately, that actually did not move in Congress because people were focused on energy laws. So they pretty much lived that by the side and eventually died in slow death. People forgot about that bill that actually got, but it was never discussed on the floor. So it's been there because people, not all of them, are thinking the same way about, particularly not this government. We have a Senate, we have a Congress, which is majorly socialist, and I'm really concerned about the direction this country is headed, because it's the stupidest thing to do. We're emulating, we're copying a failed way of government, which is Venezuela's, which is the stupidest thing. They want to have people always dependent and be ignorant and be impoverished spiritually, mentally, physically, economically. That shouldn't be, but unfortunately it's happening. Anyways, so the Fideicomiso remains for a while, okay? So we have several ways to acquire property. If you become Mexican national yourselves, and if you have a Fideicomiso, you can cancel the Fideicomiso because you're the owners, okay? All you do is you approach the bank, tell them, hey, soy mexicano, okay? Cancela el Fideicomiso. Okay, you give instructions, the bank simply will notify the government, will send this paperwork to a notario, and eventually it's formalized and it's recorded, no Fideicomiso, no fees. I myself would keep the Fideicomiso. And you would ask, Rafael, you're Mexicano, why should you have the Fideicomiso? Pretty simple, estate planning needs. We're all gonna die, like it or not. Not today, thank God, I hope. But, so we have to plan ahead. We have to have estate planning, okay? So most of us who have a checking account have some sort of estate planning because we have a beneficiary. We have to name a beneficiary in case of our passing, okay? When it comes to property, it's just you or your spouse or your children, whoever's name in the deed. But why should I have a Fideicomiso? Well, if I leave a will to my beneficiaries, when I die, they have to get a certified copy of my death certificate, okay? They have to go to a notario and here's my will, here's my father's will, here's my deceased husband's will. And we're named beneficiaries and so was named the executor. That begins a legal process that has to go to court, okay? So you have to hire either a notario or you have to hire an attorney like me, and I don't handle that type of procedure, but you have to pay legal fees. You have to enter a formal process, and you have to wait time, and then eventually the court will acknowledge that that will is legal, and the executor is able to do what he's been tasked to do, okay? And eventually beneficiaries get that. That costs money, that takes time. So going back to the Fideicomiso, if I die and I have the Fideicomiso, my beneficiary will simply have to produce a certified copy of my death certificate, provide a copy of the Fideicomiso where they're named the beneficiaries. There's no need to name an executor because I just named the beneficiaries rather than a Fideicomiso, same as those that have a Fideicomiso now. There's one clause that says so, that you haven't named beneficiaries, alternate beneficiaries. So when I die, all they have to do is go to the bank, show proof of me being dead. Here's the documentation. Here's my ID. Here's the Fideicomiso. And the bank will simply notify a notario, and the notario will update the Fideicomiso, and my beneficiaries, it would be up to them to decide to stay on the Fideicomiso or simply cancel it. But what is the difference here? I was able to save probably a year and a half and thousands of dollars in legal fees. Because even if I, as an attorney, still I will have to have the same formalities. So what's the purpose of it? One would say, well, I'm 62, I don't know how much I have left on this or the fuss, but chances are, I've seen my better years. And so being practical, I would say, well, what would it cost me to create a Fideicomiso, same as you? $1,100 pretty much is the cost of the permit to create a Fideicomiso, payable to the government. Regardless of the property being millions of dollars or being only $10,000, the cost of the permit to create a Fideicomiso is exactly the same. Okay? And then what does the bank charge? $450 to $650 annual. Some banks ask for 2 annuities paying in advance. So you have what, $1,100 plus 2 annuities, let's consider that $450 times 2, that's $900 or even $2,000, okay? Those are the only costs. Between you and I, that's the only difference. Because if I'm buying property, you and I are still paying municipal tax, what we call ISAI, which is a land acquisition tax, which is 2.4% of the worth of the transaction. So you're buying something worth $100,000, you're paying 2.4% of that. You and I are taxpayers. That's how the tax code sees us, so there's no difference, okay? So again, is it clear now that why would it be convenient for me as a Mexican to have Fideicomiso? Yeah, okay, I'd be paying $450 a year, but I have protection. What does an attorney charge for processing a will? Consider that you have a will, otherwise you're intestate, intestado, as we say, okay? And attorneys some of them charge a percentage. And you go, are you sure you're not charging? Yeah, we call it quota litis, even though there's no litigation, but they still call it quota litis. So they charge a percentage. And that is unfair. You have 5 beneficiaries, and guy's going to get a bigger chunk than one of the beneficiaries, but that's how they want it. Others will simply charge a fixed fee. So watch out for that. Do consider the likelihood of you become a Mexican. Is it better to stay on the Fideicomiso? I say yes, of course. Now, another thing, people ask me, do I need a will? Or they say, will my foreign will, Canada or U.S., be valid in Mexico? Well, what does your will say? You have a living will, you have a living trust, you have a will, you have a trust, but you have Fideicomiso. You already have state planning in your Fideicomiso. You only have to review it and make sure that it's current, and then you update that if you have to, because you probably decided that so-and-so will be joined by so-and-so as the other beneficiary, whatever, just keep it updated. I believe that's to your best interest. So what else? Going back to wills, the fact of the will, if you have the Fideicomiso, and you have your household, you have cars, you have heirlooms, you have personal belongings, okay? Yeah, you can make a list and put it in there, but you have an executor, okay? Why have a will when the most relevant investment you usually have is what? Real estate. Unless you have what? Stocks, bonds, you have a corporate interest in Mexico, because whatever you have in the States, keep in the States. Whatever you have in Canada, keep it in Canada. That is ruled by that land's law. Whatever is in Mexico, let Mexico decide on it. Because there's a difference. I had a client, and I have had so many interesting clients. His father was one of my first clients when I came out of college. And he was fighting this paternity suit, which I felt real bad about it. Him and his secretary had this thing going, and he said, don't ever get pregnant. She did. So she said, oh, you want to place it on me? You want me to be the father? Who says that you didn't go out and had someone else? So the man was nasty as nasty can be. Had no scruples, cynic. My heartburn was so bad. And eventually he bought the witnesses and was able to settle and let that eventually be another investment for him, which he had lots of money. With time, 30 years later, his son, one of his children, now my age, has a problem with an accident. He had 600 trucks moving all around the western side of the U.S. and had an accident. He relied on me. The reason I'm mentioning this is that he was running all his businesses, and he owns $110 million. That's his assets worth, okay? The U.S. and Mexico. He still remains a Mexican national. He's not a U.S. national. He just has permanent residency. But he had everything under a DBA. You know, what about corporate shield? What about this or the other? Eventually, he had to settle the accident and pay. But what I'm addressing here is that he has 9 children with 7 different women. Yes. Boy, I mean, is he a wolf? That's him. My assistant, which was beautiful and very nice and approachable, but very delicate, feminine, and respectable, simply, he opened the door for her, and he was like, oh, I could see his face stretching like this, almost having some hair of love showing. I mean, and she went like, oh, okay. But there were children that were born the same week, the same month, the same year of 2 different women. So he had to have everyone meet every once a month, like themselves or hate themselves. Otherwise, they would not be in the well. But in Mexico, you cannot impose conditions on a well that are negative, unlike what they could be in the U.S. about certain performances which are unique or particular to the person's decisions. And he said in his U.S. well, if ever any one of you wants to contest my well in Mexico, keep in mind that I have 1/3 of my assets in Mexico, 2/3 in the U.S. You'd be kissing away what you have in the U.S. settle for what you have in Mexico. So you have to love each other like yourself or hate yourself. You have to come. But what I'm saying is part of and I created a Fideicomiso for him, okay? I created a Fideicomiso for all his assets because he had this numerous complications. That is an extreme case, okay? And even though I did extend myself a little beyond the real estate issue, but it had to do with real estate because he owned pretty much everything was fixed assets, property in the U.S., property in Mexico. But he was able to include property in the U.S. through Mexican will because eventually if he died, we would simply have a letter rogatory from a Mexican judge to the U.S. judge to honor the verdict in Mexico or honor the will. So again, I did go a little bit deeper into the estate planning thing, but I just wanted to make sure that you understand what are the benefits of the Fideicomiso, what are the benefits of keeping a Fideicomiso. I'd rather go for the Fideicomiso anytime. It costs money, yeah, $450, but what will the attorney charge you? Plenty more. Probably not me or you, but to our beneficiaries, you want to have them have the lightest load as possible, but having clear set rules, okay? Yes?
Is the Fideicomiso renewable?
Yes, yes.
Another 50 years?
Yes.
In perpetuity or just?
In perpetuity.
In perpetuity.
Okay. Yes.
If you want to get out of one, so you can sell your property and buy another piece of property, does that cost you?
It costs you. If you're saying.
I want to get out of the one
Okay.
I have, sell it. Will that cost me?
Well, yes.
I know it costs me to get into another property, but I mean,
Yeah,
to get out of
you have a Fideicomiso, and you have clauses. Among the clauses, you find one that says comisiones, which is fees. Whatever modification you want on the Fideicomiso will have a specific fee addressed right there. But if there's some which are generic, some are specific. I'm talking about banks. Some banks say transmisión de dominio, which is assigning property to someone else. It has a specific cost. So look at your clauses and see what is the cost. And be aware of this. Bancomer has updated their fees without notifying you, without consenting. A contract is consensual, okay? We had 2 parties to agree. Whatever changes had to be notified. Bancomer doesn't care about how you feel because they simply steamroll over you. So they have increased that. There's this client who is canceling her trust. She's selling. She's in Todos Santos. And the fee was originally $500. They asked $1,650. Why? Because they feel like it. That's how nasty Bancomer is. I address as much as I probably would like to on the Fideicomiso without getting off and veering away from the topic, but I would like to open to questions and answers, if I may. Yes, sir.
Can you put multiple properties in one?
Yes, but there's a problem with that. Excuse me? Can you put multiple properties under one trust? Yes, and I would say think about it. I have a client who bought property in San Felipe, and he bought one lot, and then he later bought the lot next door. So he fused them, okay? They're under the same Fideicomiso. Now he had someone wanting to buy that particular lot because he built on this side, that other one still is more like a garden. But he said, I have no use for it, I'll make some money out of it, you know. He can't. The government will not consent to slice that off. They will not allow it to be segregated. So careful with that, because even though it's an additional cost, if you or your children beneficiaries want to do that, the government may not accept it. And I've tried and they refused in writing. So I do have evidence that the government will not allow it. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
It's kind of a two-part question. I'm very deaf. Can you hear me?
I can hear you clear, yes.
Yeah. I live in the worst situation, money-wise, here in Mexico, which is called Lease land. So if you have a chance, you probably don't want to go that route. I've been there 32 years, and the owner has not tried to take the property down. So the first part of the question is on lease land in Mexico. I was told recently that the family owns that property in perpetuity, forever. They can never sell it themselves out of the family. That's the first part of the question. Is that true in Mexican law?
I don't see that ever. I never seen that.
And the second part was, is there by the government a cap, whether it's lease land or wherever, that the annual or biannual raise in the lease fee? Is there a cap that it can't go past? Like 32 years ago I paid X.
You're talking about your rent payments?
I'm talking about running.
The price of rent?
Renting the land.
Yeah, the rent
Yeah.
or whatever. you
Okay.
call it.
Yeah. Okay.
Lease, rent. So
Yes.
the first year, 32 years, that was very doable. And even adding 10%, which is in the contract, even adding 10% every year or every other year, it gradually gets up there. So now, after 32 years, personally, I'm at, you can't beat this in the States, I'm at $6.55 per month.
Mm-hmm.
I'm right by the beach. So each year, though, it's going to get bigger and bigger. And is there a cap? Like, would it ever get to, say, $2,000?
There is. There is. Yes.
A cap. Is
Yeah, and outside it, because when I address any topics, it's not that I assume or because I was lucky to have my way on negotiating setting or something or the government. No, everything is just, and I don't have the photographic memory to recite a particular article of the law, but you know, Mexico's legal system is actually based on Roman law. So that's the main difference. Why things are so complicated in Mexico and the rest of Latin America? Because you have common law in the U.S. and Canada, Mexico doesn't. So it's always codes and few lax laws and regulations that are absolutely so backwards and so few of, which leaves a lot of room for interpretation. One particular glaring problem is what Maureen has just addressed. And those that read me on Facebook on Baja Legal Advice, and I have a little, probably not 900 articles, I forgot, I don't keep track anymore. But I would say don't buy a house on leased land. I have so many stories and I have evidence that I could never cite the case. And Rancho Parker's one, I can name 10 more. Either side of the peninsula, all the way down to La Pastora and Todos Santos, all the way up here to La Misión. And anyways, but you asked something about the price of rent. Let me just say that in the case of real estate and particularly leases, I have one case that is totally something that I would like everyone to consider if you ever want to buy a home in lease land. There's a principle in law that says, lo accesorio sigue la suerte de lo principal, which means that which is built on top of land, the main thing, if you own the land, you own whatever is on top. That is a legal principle that is somewhat questionable considering the fact of leased land. But so addressing the case, this man who died a few years ago, he was an attorney, and he leased this land north of San Quintin in Vicente Guerrero, a little knob there, beautiful, and he negotiated with the owner of the property, who's now deceased, and said, you know, we have such a beautiful area here, but you're not making any money. Why don't you rent me that property there for 10 years? Because we know that the law of Mexico does not allow a lease to extend beyond 10 years, okay? The difference is in industrial, commercial space, and when you have property for agriculture purposes, such as an ejido. And an ejido is a different set of problems. So anyways, this man agreed with the owner of the land to rent the property for 10-year leases with multiple renewals, and that they would address any increase of rent at the end of the 10-year period, well, prior to that. But they agreed that the price would be in dollars, okay? And he agreed that the dollar is still the most steady coin or currency in the world. As I understand it, I may be wrong, but it's stable. So he said, see, I'm paying you in dollars. Mexico's currency is always, you know, flip-flopping. So why don't we have this clause in there that says that any increase will be based on the, what do you call it, the IPC, the cost of living in San Diego, which is the closest city, relevant city next to Baja California. So whatever the increase is, we will reflect that in rent every 10 years. Do you agree? And he said, yes. That was smart. I suggest you always do that, because how is justified that, yeah, the cost of living here, actually, you know, I may be off by a huge margin, but doesn't the dollar stretch at least twice as much here in Mexico in a way? At least, you know, that's conservatively speaking. So anyways, going back to the topic, the other clause, and before I address the topic of how much can a landlord increase the rent per the law, this clause, keep in mind that this would save a lot of hardship, a lot of problems to anyone owning a house on leased land. This man, Mr. Connor, he agreed with this owner of the property. One clause, I consider that an ironclad clause. It says so. If for whatever reason at any time this lease were not to be renewed, the owner/landlord agrees to buy the property at the fair market value. Nothing else to be said. Is it clear? You should have that. Now, not only that, every lease that is somewhat, you know, depending on how much rent you pay, have a no price. Because I know that some landlords have been real resentful for me being so blunt about predatory tactics against tenants, particularly in this town. And as I said before, I move around the whole peninsula. This is the worst there is. Not only that, and that's another topic, fair commercial practices by real estate agents, none, few. But again, Matt, before, this is what the code says. This is Civil Code of Baja, and I have an article in my space, and I put it on Rosarito Living. It says, in those contracts in which the amount of the monthly rent does not exceed 150 general minimum wages current in the federal district, that is Mexico, the increase may not exceed 10% of the amount agreed upon as monthly income. And here's a little exercise that I did. If the rent is less than the equivalent of 150 minimum wages, which is minimum wage in Baja is 176 pesos a day, which is approximately 26,500 pesos, okay, which is $1,359 by calculating an exchange rate of 19. It went down. It was 19 at one time. So the increase should have a cap of 10% per annum, okay? However, the monthly price of rent is greater than $1,359, okay? The increase will be mutually agreed by the parties, thus it cannot legally be raised by the landlord. So there's a cap, even though it's high, based on what you're currently paying. But again, chances are that a landlord that has been controlling rent the way he has for this many years, the chances of the landlord actually consenting to doing an addendum to the lease to cap it based on the cost of living of San Diego are probably very slim, but you would have the answer to that. Have I answered your questions? Thank you. So yes, don't ever buy a land, a home on lease land. Rancho Packard, and I can say that without any problem because it hit the news. It was noteworthy. It is legal cases. A client of mine, actually a friend, I never built her, but I never turn people away. As much as I can afford, sometimes people have the wrong idea that I do everything for free, but you know, I do eat, I do have to wear clothes, I have to pay rent, I have to do whatever you do, so it costs me, and I have family to raise it, so we have to have a dignified life, and I have to be a provider. But when people cannot afford me, I do make an exception and guide them as far as I can. But if it's not my field of expertise, I always admit it, this is not something that I'm trained to do. Let me find someone who's relevant enough and who's credible enough, even though I don't trust a single trial attorney. Not today. I don't think I ever will. Anyways, Rancho Packard, this woman, she said, oh, I want to rent property in Rancho Packard. That's in Ensenada on the way to Bufador, I believe, past Punta Banda. And some of you may know about the Punta Banda fiasco years ago. I had written a lot about it. So anyways, I told her, stay away. There's feuding between siblings. That's bound to get nasty. And it's like a ticking bomb. And I lost track of her. And with time, she says, Rafael, she's on the phone. And she's so alarmed because she's been kicked out. I said, what are you being kicked out? Don't you have a lease? No, I bought this home. But I told you not to. How much do you pay? $65,000. And I added $30,000 in improvements. You're off $100,000. Now, I won't allow them. They will break down the door. See, the court will issue instructions to have the police be there, okay, and have a locksmith and remove or break down the door, literally. Get out of harm's way. Do you have a notarized lease, a lease? No, it's not. Who are you paying rent? Well, one of the feuding parties. Get out of the way. But get out of the way. First and foremost, your integrity. Deal with that later. I didn't want to insult her by saying, I told you so. I did tell her. Now she's trying to collect the pieces and suing, and it's not a. If you know Murphy's Law, add the Pancho thing, and it's twice as nasty. Pancho Murphy. It's twice as nasty in Mexico. So always ask. One problem that I see every day, there's not, well, now I have few inquiries because now that I charge a fee, a minimum of $75 for half an hour, my fee is $150 an hour. And people say, well, you're Mexican attorney, not even an attorney in the U.S. Well, yeah, this is Mexico, by the way. So what I go like that, Treasurer Sierra Madre guy, badges? I don't need no stinking badges. I'm in Mexico, so okay. But the thing is, that a lot of good people in the U.S. are, in Canada as well, are used to having everything under a set of rules specific and protective of consumers. Mexico is not like that. You're on your own when you cross the border. And I'm not making this up. Some of you may have suffered and are probably even suffering consequences of abuse by, and not always at the hands of Mexicans, even some bad Americans, bad Canadians. I've seen that and have evidence of that. But when you're about to do something, slow down your pace. Don't be in haste. Ask. Ask as much as you can before you take one step, because and I will say this again. If you're going to make someone happy, make yourself happy. Don't be pressured into a sales pressure strategy where this one is wanting to sell your property. And let me mention a case, and I don't care if they feel bad about it. This lady, Tunisia, who's now bought in Cancun, she was trying to buy property at El Descanso. That community is beautiful. And that community a bit kind of rivals Real del Mar, and I love Real del Mar. I wanted to buy there. Unfortunately, it went up in flames, a lot of that recently. So she says, Rafael, I wanted to review this contract. And I said, have you signed it? Yes, I dropped $25,000 deposit. What? But you didn't do due diligence? What is due diligence? Title search? What is title search? But, isn't the contract legal? Isn't it supposed to be legal? Well, you're in Mexico. But aren't we bound by the same rules? No. No? Okay. So I call in the office and they say, we don't deal with attorneys. If you're going to represent the lady, we'll give her money back. And they did give her a check for $25,000 because they said, and it was not me, it was the fact that they don't want to deal with attorneys. Trust me, okay, yeah, oh, sorry, okay, oh, keep riding going, oh, get up, keep riding moving. They want that non-refundable, in this case it was refundable, she was lucky. Eventually she said, those people are nasty. Why would I allow them to be guiding me by the hand? I don't know what's going to happen. I have cases, too many cases. A client of mine buys property in Baja Malibu where I'm still the legal rep for the HOA. Baja Malibu on the playa side. And she buys this nice house on the beach side at the corner. And she pays $395,000 10 years ago. So she had the property on the market for 3.5 years and it was not selling. And she wants her money. She lives up in Yuma. And eventually someone said, I'll buy the property for $310,000. I'll give you $150,000 and I'll pay the balance over the next 5 years. And I don't mind placing a mortgage on it. It's just fine, let's do it. So she figures she has no capital gains. Why? Because she's going to lose what? $85,000? She was bound to sell at $310,000. She bought for $395,000. So there's a loss of $85,000. So she says, I have no capital gains. And I said, you do? What do you mean? Well, remember when you buy property here, it's dollars. The legal currency of Mexico is what? Yes. But does the law allow parties to mutually agree on a particular currency? Yes. But it does also say that regardless of that, the balance will be calculated always on the peso. So when you close a Fideicomiso today, the notario will do what? He will check the Federal Official Journal, which is the way the federal government notifies the people about rules, regulations, fees, and what have you, right? So the peso is always fluctuating. So there's an official exchange rate. It's published every day, Monday to Friday, okay? So the exchange rate back then was pretty much 10 to 1. So $395,000 would be bound to be times 10, right? 3.95 million pesos. But there was another problem. She didn't have an attorney to guide her through the purchase. She relied on the real estate agent. They did the nastiest thing to her. Hate to use the term, but I love cliches. Bamboozle. You know what that means, right? Being tricked. Anyways, and I get red in the face because I love this so much, but I hate dirty tricks. And the lady was convinced to give 2 checks. When I look at the deed and I look at all the paperwork, the appraisal shows the property being worth $50,000. And guess what the declared value was? $50,000. What taxable gain did she actually have if she was bound to sell at $310,000? $260,000. Guess what the the taxes for that, 35%. And not only that, she was not even getting 310 right off. She was just getting what? 150 minus legal fees, minus what? Capital gains. So she was tricked by the person she trusted to handle the transaction, the real estate agent. Yes. The notario did not do his job. It's his job. And he would have been liable. But the thing is, the notary law says that for every 100,000 people, there has to be, for every 20,000 people, there has to be one notary. There's only 23 in the whole Tijuana. How many people we have? Well, supposedly based on the census, we have at least 1.7 million. We actually have more like 3. Anyways, what does this mean? Whatever they do, the government protects. They have a way to diffuse this and kind of give that cloud of protection, even though the law says they're liable. But the notary should have been on his job. I was selling property, one of the first properties that was sold in Punta Banda. That house was originally from a client of mine. I was hired by a company. It's actually, well, I'm not sure it's a Fortune 100 or a Fortune 500, but it's Hyco Corporation in the U.S. They are in the metal mechanics industry, and they buy failed companies the world over. And they had this foundry in Sausal. And the owners of that property, which was a company in Temecula, they bought this property in Punta Banda during the conflict, where people said, I bought property. The U.S. consulate approaches me and says, you're in charge of Fideicomisos for Banamex, the largest bank in Mexico, Fideicomisos. Confidentially speaking, here's 2 files. Give us your 2 cents worth of it. As the expert on Fideicomisos they are. You know what I saw? None of those were purchase agreements. They were all membership contracts. Membership contracts where they were allowed to build and enjoy for 30 years. So what is it that you claim to your rights to be? Membership rights? It's not ownership. It's not a fideicomiso. It didn't even mention a fideicomiso. So people don't read sometimes, and they unfortunately, yes. That's how I bought myself a Cadillac, and it's a lemon. Honest to God, it's not out there because it's in the shop. But I was naive. Yeah, I sometimes fall for other people's tricks, but not in my craft. So all what I'm saying is don't trust the first impression you have. And I always go back to this song back in the 60s, the Smiling Faces. Remember that song by the Undisputed Truth? Smiling Faces, show no traces of the evil beneath them. Watch out for the pat in the back. It might just what? Hit your back? That's the purpose. That's the rule. You have to watch out for yourselves. People want your money. People want your commission. There's a lady who called me yesterday, and she's selling a beautiful piece of property in Punta Piedra, 488 square meters. She said, I want $100,000. And I said, I'll buy it from you. I'll buy it for you. $100,000 in Punta Piedra on the beach side? You know what that worth? $350. Easy. But I have principles. There's nothing in the law that says that I cannot sell property, but I'm not about to do that because I have to walk a very straight line. Okay? So what I can do is, hey, whoever wants to buy, hey, they can contact the lady, and you start bidding, and if any one of you wants to hire me, but I won't get into conflict of interest. But going back to real estate, my good friend Canoa Bindolillo, and did I pronounce his last name right? Last name? Biondolillo, it's in Spanish. Okay. He invited me to do a presentation at his office at Baja 123. And usually real estate agents don't like the sight of me. They have their own reasons. I'm not the nicest to look at, but beneath this, I'm nicer than you can imagine. So anyways. But I'm passionate about what I do because in my watch, I'm not going to allow a fast one to cost you, because if my name is stated once, I'm lost. I've been listed by the U.S. Embassy as an attorney, as a reliable attorney for 20-some years, because I was an attorney for them when they bought property along La Recta on Chapultepec. And they didn't have to have Fideicomiso because embassies do not, they have sovereign rights, okay? And Mexico allows that, so the federal government of Mexico consent and said, oh, sure, go ahead. So they bought 2 units for the diplomatic staff, where they have there. So ever since then, they say, oh, can we refer people to you? I said, of course, yes. I'm not rich, I have all that I need. I don't need richness, I have a rich life because I have something that drives me. I have family to take care of. Unfortunately, some of you that know me know that I lost a daughter 30 days ago. She was a victim of malpractice, and she died at 17. Do I have a passion for what I do? Of course I do. And it brings me to feel this sense of, but I do care. I do care. And I don't care about the greenback. I care about what I do, to have a name, to be able to drive and not to be looking at the rear mirror, and to be able to have a good night's sleep, to know that my bills are paid, but to make sure that I do care for you, that you don't have to be in a situation where you're going to be upset, worried. You probably are not in your best years, and probably, you want to have that beautiful scenery every morning, holding a cup of coffee and your cat on the side or the dog, but you have issues. You have issues because someone abused your trust, and there's no rules, unfortunately, and I keep getting red in the face because I keep seeing this every day. There's no day that goes by without me getting 7, 8 situations in which real estate agents have abused their clients. So, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand that those of us who have already purchased our home in a lease have no rights?
If you're renting and you own the home, you're in a pickle. Sorry for being so blunt, but you're in a pickle. I could, and if you want me, I can address some examples. This family rents in a campo south of, in between San Felipe and Puertecitos. And so, same as my client from Guerrero Negro, San Quintin. The property, when they met, the property was undeveloped, so everything was my compadre, my amigo, and you come to my birthday and my, and they give gifts to the children, they see them in grades, they even help them go to college. And with time, there's not one house, there's many houses. With time, rent from $50 goes up to $500, and with time, the old man dies and the children remain. And now those that are still with us, they simply want to increase that, and they say, well, I want to develop this, now you have to leave. What do you mean? I invested $300,000. And your father and your brothers, they actually were the workmen that built houses because the contract said that if I had any improvement, it would have to be to you. Now you want me out? I'm not going to move out. Well, guess what? I own the land. What are you going to do about it? What are they going to do about it? They don't have much to say. The only thing they can do is to remain there as long as possible. So you eventually, I hate to say this, I said it many times in writing, at some point you may have to cut your losses. Yes, sir.
We are in the same campo.
Okay.
We have an interesting situation because we rent, but we rent from people who are the master lease holders. They're not the owners of the land.
Okay. I have a client who's been renting this very large home in San Miguel, and he's been renting for a while, and the landlord has been hinting to increase the rent. He asked me, what are my rents? And I said, let me look at the contract. And what is it that I did? Check if he was the right owner, an American. I went to the public register of property and commerce, which is Registro Público de la Propiedad y Comercio. In the U.S. or in California, when you want to look at corporations, where do you go? You go to the State Department, Secretary of State, I'm sorry, and you go to what? The Department of Corporations, something like that? Oh, yes, okay. In Mexico, we have Registro Público de la Propiedad y de Comercio, both. So if you look for Rafael Solorzano Montenegro, whatever I registered a long time, corporations, nonprofits, property, will be there. Okay, it's public accessible. If you're ever looking at, okay, this man, I want to rent that property, but I'm not sure he's a squatter himself. I don't know if he was land, if he has a power of attorney. He has any legal right to be the landlord. But he doesn't want to give you proof of ownership because he feels insulted. 99% of the people, Mexicans included, when they rent property, they don't ask, they just sign. So we are not that bright sometimes, but I as an attorney do the opposite because of my legal training. But again, you can always look there.
I myself can go there and look
Of
at
course,
it.
it's registro público de la propiedad
De la propiedad.
y comercio. It's at the state building here in Rosarito.
Y Fideicomiso.
Registro público de la propiedad
Comercio.
y de comercio. Okay? And you go to the counter and tell the man,
I can't do it online. I have to
no,
go there.
no, notaries can, but they pay a fee and they have access. You and I are in the same boat. We have to walk over. The good thing is there's few people ever in line, if ever, unlike Tijuana where you have like 300 all the time. Well, I pay people to do that for me. When it comes to Rosarito, I just do it myself. See, what you have to give the man is the complete name of the landlord. If he says Juan Perez, that would not net you anything. You have to have Juan Perez Martinez. You have to have the middle name added. So
Would that be on our lease document?
it should be. So if you ask Juan Perez Martinez, and if there's more than one, he will ask you, where's that property at? And he'll be looking at the screen and you'll be looking at your lease and tell him, oh, it's Zapata number so-and-so. Oh, okay. So he will give you a printout at no cost, okay? And you'll be able to match and say, who's this? Oh, no, that's him. See what I'm saying?
One quick question, please. If you're renting leased land,
Mm-hmm.
does the landlord, master leaseholder, whoever, do they have minimum responsibilities for maintenance and things like that?
Of course, of course.
Now, the question is that written in your lease, or is that an over?
Regardless of
Mexican law?
regardless of the fact that it may not be written in the lease, it is in the law. So that subsedes. So there's such a thing as lesion, like you have an injury. See, when you take advantage of someone who doesn't know the law, or because of cultural or language issues, that person may not know that what he was consenting to was not proper nor legal. That makes it, or can be null and void, but it has to be filed and litigated and eventually ruled by the court. So again, the fact that it may not be there doesn't mean that it's legal. And I don't want to read this because it would not be proper. But look on Rosarito Living and do a topic search and look for me. And there's many articles written. But the other option is you go on Facebook and look up Baja Legal Advice. And I have a little over 1,900 people there reading me. Baja Legal Advice. And I brought some business cards, by the way. But if you look me up, Baja Legal Advice, do apply for membership. Just answer the 3 questions there. Are you in real estate? Are you a real estate agent? Are you this? Not that I turn them away. I just want to know. Okay? And you do the topic search and check civil code, or you check rent increase. Whatever, whatever leads to that, you will find. And I did a printout, and I have, and this you can take with you if you want to. It's actually a translation I did of the article. And let me just read a few articles because you may have a few questions there that may answer your question as well. A lease may not exceed 10 years in properties intended for housing, 15 for commercial, and 20 for industrial purposes. So when people say 10 years always, no, only for residential. If it is for commercial, 15. If it is for industrial, it can be 20. And if it is for agricultural purposes out in a rancho, 30 years. Okay?
So does that have to be written in the lease, like the termination is 10 years, or does it not?
It is mutually agreed, but if it's you agree to annual renewal, that's up to the parties to consent.
Mine doesn't say when it expires.
Well, when it doesn't say, it's indefinite.
Oh.
Yeah, and there's particular rules for that particular matter. Just keep this in mind.
And that's the thing, everyone in our area, they all have different rules, they all have different leases, everyone's is different. So you're looking at someone who gets to have guests for 2 weeks,
Uh-huh.
someone who gets to have guests for
Yeah.
2 days.
Well-
So
Let me read this, and you may probably have answers to that because that's what the law says. That is unnegotiable. Because even if you waive rights unknowingly, the law is there to protect you, and so you can hire someone. Problem with this is that when you hire an attorney, you're in a way probably shooting yourself in the foot because there costs, what do you call that, self-defeating cost something? Putting myself.
Not to mention bad will.
Yeah, but when you have a number of people and you all round up and you, let's just put a stronger stance with a number of people and let's put all our effort through. Like I represented people at La Salina, and La Salina is as nasty as it gets on this side of La Salina. There's a guy named Larry or something. It's a real piece of work. And I have had clients there that had the same problem. They built homes, 2 homes, over 30 years. Now they're in their 80s. Now they don't go to a property. Their children don't want to go into Mexico. Weird. I thought that people younger than I would have a freer perspective of Mexico. Most of the people who do have Fideicomisos here, at least 60% of them, their children said, I'm never going to step into Mexico. They're lost. Anyways, so yeah, there's a lot of, that campo is really, you should stay away. And I don't mind that. I do have a couple of death threats that I filed charges against. People call me and saying, lay off. Quit talking about predatory tactics. We don't like it. And he warned me. And I filed criminal charges on a phone and I found a name. So yes, there's nasty people here. There's a lady in the campo that was very upset because she was to be charged $15 extra on her lease because of something. And you know what? The landlord lives there and carries a gun, holstered, walking around. There's no concealed carry in Mexico, by the way. The guy's criminal. Careful. So that's an extreme case. So, anyways, going back to this. The lease agreement shall not be rescinded by debt. It means a lot, doesn't it? Your children, your beneficiaries have a right to say.
Can you change the beneficiary at any time?
Nope. That'd be different. That'd be different. Because that would require what? A consensual an agreement. And if the other party is not willing, you cannot force it. But you can remain. The thing is, he will remain and outlive what? The remaining of the term on the lease. So a lot of this happens and they say, no, you're a beneficiary, not bound to be here. This lady calls me and says, my dad was murdered in Bahia, Los Angeles. We own this home. Well, we built the home on leased land. My father and a friend of him were assassinated at the home. We still don't know why, by whom. But the owner of the property, Mr. Diaz, who was always a friend, a paternal figure in a way when I was growing up, when I was going through high school, he says, you're not welcome to this community anymore. Really, instead of being sympathetic to your loss and whatever, he doesn't want me there. What are my rights? It can get that bad. I'm not making this up. Okay, so again, the lease agreement shall not be rescinded by the debt of the landlord nor that of the lessee unless otherwise agreed by the parties. Yes, it is. It can be agreed upon. So careful with. So do read and do question yourself, but have someone to interpret, because even though you may know Espanol, even a Mexican may not know that if he doesn't have legal training. Okay. If during the term of the lease, for any reason, there's a change of ownership of the leased property, the lease shall remain in effect as agreed in the contract. I've seen cases in where people bought the land, bought a home, bought everything in it, but guess what? The tenant doesn't want to clear because he has to outlive what? The contract. So you have to ask. Not every case is the same. Not every land is empty land, or not all land is private. Some of that may be federal zone. We know what federal zone is, and if we have questions, we can later discuss what is. So with regard to the rent, the lease, the lessee will have the obligation to pay the new owner the rent specified in the contract. But what happens if the guy doesn't want to take your money? There's such a thing in Espanol we call consignación de rentas. You hire an attorney, and he will deposit rent in court. But do never withhold rent, because if you're not current with rent, you waive your rights away, and you will lose the case irremediably, okay? You should never withhold, as angered, as upset as you may be, you have to have what? Cover your end of the deal to force the other party to do its half. But if you are not current, you're not losing out of a battle. Don't even start it. It's not worth it, okay? So what happens? I have this client in San Quintin as well. I'm going to be there probably first of the next month, depositing rents because the landlord died. My client died, but who's there? The family. And they wanted to increase that threefold. And I told my client, it's not happening. The law says this. And your contract says the other. She says, I want to live up to that. No problem. Let's have the judge have a say on it. And we've been depositing rent $1,100 every year. It's $1,100. Well, it's a big property. It's surely worth 3 times that. But she doesn't want to listen. She doesn't want to readdress. So they should readdress what the rules of engagement by being understanding. One way is okay, but one way is not always doable. So again, if at the expiration of the lease, there's a balance remaining on behalf of the lessee, the lessor shall reimburse it immediately. Not 3 months later, not 30 days, not when I want. Immediately. That's what the law says. Article 2296. Unless it has some other actions against the lessee. Okay? What happens when you have this guy saying, you've been renting here for 10 years, but guess what? I'm going to sell. Well, he has to give you first right of refusal. Otherwise, that purchase can be nullified by you. Because if you were not given first right of refusal, even if it's not included in the lease, the law says that it should. So you can do that. Is it doable? Well, for what purpose? I cannot afford the property. Just, can we just agree to give me a couple more months so I can find somewhere, that I can afford, that I can feel like I belong. So the thing is that if that person wants to terminate the lease, not to sell the property, not to live in the property, but wants to terminate the lease, he has to recognize the fact that the law says that if you lived in that property for 5 years, and you've done substantial improvements, okay, that you are able to ask for a renewal for the exact same term that is about to expire. But you have to be current with your lease, okay? There's another thing, and it's something that the average person doesn't know. When the lease has expired and the landlord did not kick you out, give you a notification or summons of court, he has 15 days, okay, to have you notified to move, because if he doesn't do that, you can do the opposite. It's called tácita reconducción. Tácita reconducción means that the lessee can sue the landlord to renew the contract that's about to expire. So whenever possible, make your leases as long as possible instead of 12 months, because otherwise you'll only have 12 months, but at the same rate. But probably that allows you 12 months to look for a suitable location and a suitable community and a rent that is affordable. Okay? So that's called tácita reconducción.
Landowner obligated to buy your house if they kick you out, or is that different?
Oh no, that's different. He's not obligated to anything. You're bound by a lease, but you made substantial improvements. So if we read again this that I just did in your case, you own the property, you own the house. That in itself is an investment. If you built it, it would have been an improvement. Okay? Now, did you build? That's different. And you know what I'm driving at, right? What is it that I just said? That if you made substantial improvements, that's not an improvement, that's an investment. That may be an exception if you were to sue trying to base yourself on that. The court may say the law says improvement. You then improve. You bought something finished. Yeah. But then again, you can, if you don't want rent to be increased, deposit rents in court. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you buy on these land, if you buy an existing structure,
Mm-hmm.
what's the ownership of that? It's not in a Fideicomiso.
I'm sorry.
How do you own an existing structure on what document?
How do you, well,
Not a fee agreement, right? So what is it that you?
well, you'll simply scratch your head as I usually do, even today, even though I thought I'd seen everything. But the other day I was asked by a lady in a couple to give her private consultation, so I drove over, and there's this trailers that they pull in there, and they added a little improvements to make it nice, and the beach is right there. So she said the landlord wants to double rent, and we started talking about it. So I asked her, how long have you been renting? Well, I own this. What do you mean own? I own the trailer. Well, at home. Okay. And can I see your lease? Oh, we never had one. Well, you do have one. It's just not in written form. It's not printed. But you have an agreement. Well, yes, we do. What about rent? How long have you been paying rent? Oh, pretty much 11 years. Can I see a receipt? Oh, I've never been given one. Okay. Can I see a check, return check, a balance? Oh, it's always cash. And what is it that you actually want me to do? Who you bought the home from? Oh, an American lawyer who used to live here. I paid him $35,000 cash. Okay, and and I do have a statement for that. I do have return check, and I have. Well, yeah, that isn't the problem. The problem is possession, because he's left, cleared out, and cashed that, and you have no recourse on him because you knew what you were getting into, didn't you? Well, yeah, I knew that had to strike a new deal with the landlord. By the way, the landlord's a squatter. Oh, and something important. If I were your attorney and the landlord was about to evict you, and you may quote me if you want, I no longer do litigation. But if I have your summons and you have time dated material that you have to respond, otherwise you lose. You have, let's say, 15 days to respond in writing with an attorney. The thing here is, the guy says, here's the lease. There's my name on it, that's the tenant's name. Okay? So what is it that I do? I go and check to what? The Registro Público, la Propiedad y Comercio. Is the fact that there's a name above the dotted line that says landlord make him a landlord? No. Do you have to do what? Substantiate. What does that mean? Proof, evidence, documented evidence that it gets validated where? A Registro Público. What would I do? I would say, the guy has no right to do that, because even though there was an agreement, he doesn't own the land. Now, that is bound to open quite a fight. Well, he eventually went, I don't know. That I have to say. I really don't know, because I'm not a trial attorney. But I've seen that eventually forcing what? You have to force conditions to have an amicable agreement. If things are not the best at communication skills being prevalent and the other party doesn't want to listen, eventually you may have to force conditions. But do you have a case to force conditions? You have someone to review your case, not me, a trial attorney. Okay? So that is something for you to think about. Yes?
I want to bring up something very important. When my mom came here, she was quite the real estate person. She worked for the developer. And to this day, I admired her totally. She had two attorneys, and she said to her clients, ask me questions. And most people really didn't know what to ask, but she had to end up educating them. And to this day, I go down the street with my dog, and people say, how's your mom? No one has ever come back to her with anything negative. So I learned that, and so I got into real estate. I joined a very big company here, and so I saw things I don't agree with at all. And even the professional group, So anyway, I did go for my license, and I was really proud about that. And they said at one point, you were not, if you had a sale, you would not be able to go through the notary unless you were registered and licensed. Okay, that never happened. But what, I feel so bad for these people that come here, and they rely on the realtor. And I wish there was a test that everyone had to take or something, because you, in order to pass that test, you have to know the laws of Mexico, everything. And
maybe, if I understand this right, what we're talking about the lack of enforcement of laws. Why do people allow this? Why does a notario allow, like the example I gave a while ago, about this lady been defrauded by someone declaring the appraisal value on the notarized deed instead of the true value of the transaction? The notario was bound to know, because he has to look at the paperwork, even though many of us never seen a notario because it's always his staff. But they're bound to know, they're bound to understand, they're bound to be trained, they're supposedly liable. But let me give you a clear example. I have one brother whose wife is from Guadalajara, and they bought property in downtown Guadalajara, as large as a metropolitan area it is. Guess what happened? Within the month, the property got sold again. And you go, well, like, was that notarized? Yes, it was. Does he have a deed? Yes, he does. Was it recorded? Yes, it was recorded. But someone forged paperwork and appeared as Jose and Maria. And the notary, the weirdest thing, he was with the same notario. Wasn't he supposed to know? Oh, how can this be selling when I only just recorded it 30 days ago? It wasn't bound to create someone's curiosity, and guess what? It got sold again within 3 weeks. What's going on here? Corruption from a notario, corruption from the registro público, because they are also supposed not just to be recording, to be checking if it makes sense. But guess what? Enforcement is lacking. It's not an accident, it's by design. Unfortunately, as hard as it is, I understand. Here's why I'm not a trial attorney. I don't want to fail. I don't want to fail. Should I take your case just for the sake of taking your money and heating up your ideas about something that might not happen? Most can. Most do. Money grabbers, a jack of all trades. You throw a rock, you're bound to hit one of them. I'd rather not. I like to stick to what I do, that which is doable.
Thank you. Excuse
My
us.
pleasure.
We have to go.
Okay. Thank you. So yes, unfortunately, there's not a solution in sight because the system is fueled by corruption. I'm not trying to paint the sky rosy. Mexico is still a particular set of circumstances that does not make sense. That's why we call Mexico Mágico, because no one understands how it works. Not even I. You know, why don't I live in the States? Because I love so much my family and my country, my city, that I thought I'd be a difference maker. Guess what? I'm embittered, I'm soured, I'm saddened, I'm upset. I gave all my life to Mexico. I was even a public servant. I wasn't able to do a thing. My boss didn't want me in the same room with the other directors because he didn't like me, because he knew I was so stupidly adhere to rules and facts and walking thin line doing what's doable, that he would not keep me in the room because he wanted me to be a strategist, be the guy who'd be promoting California, doing speeches for the mayor and all that. But he didn't like me there because he knew I could tell that he'd be doing something illegal, taking money from from the public. So,
And is there any recourse for realtors who do someone wrong?
well, the problem is, there was this lady yesterday sent me an email. And with all respect, she said, oh, there's a lot of Americans like me here, so I live in Yuma. Why not simply come on over and set up shop? What is the price of rent? And I said, hey, wait. No. For you to be in business, you have to have a visa. You have to be qualified for a visa. It's not just wanting one, it's just being qualified for it. Solvency minimums and all that, okay? The other thing is, for you to have a license, you have to do what? Be trained. Apply. You have to, there's not as much as I understand, there's no application in English. We're not that willing to serve and help as California may do, having more than one language in official paperwork. No, so you're supposed to know what? Espanol, okay, read and write, understand. Not only that, you have to understand the laws, the legal framework. And I can recite, and I brought a printout of the legal framework of a Fideicomiso, okay? So the other thing is, he says, but hey, they're not even licensed. All my friends, none of them have a license and they live stateside. And I say, yeah, but guess what? They're cheating on their taxes. How can they justify that income from Mexico if they don't have a license? You know, if Mexico doesn't mind, the U.S. does. Are you comfortable with that thought? You know, that you may have a problem with time? It's like a ticking bomb. It eventually will surface. Like lies, they always come up to the surface, don't they? You know, it will happen. If you cheat, you'll be caught with time, even if you're long debt. But going back to the topic, she also has to be a taxpayer. Okay? She has to have a physical address, a business address. But you know, it's like when I went to Baja 123, Canoa was telling me, you know, I keep driving this thing through, and that's what I brought you here, because I know you're very strict. You do one thing the only way it should be done, not the multiple ways to cheat someone for the sake of making a commission. And it's so hard to find people that are willing to live up to that commitment. That this is our vision. My vision is to be respectable, to honor the consumer. I said, and he said, that's why I brought you here. I said, so can I be clear? Of course. I said, thank you. So that's what it is.
I just want to say, I think I really admire you being here, especially after a lot. I'm very sorry about that. The way my mind is working in our country, it's so nice to hear from someone like that wants to protect people, that fits, has morals, everything. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. But it's like, see, someone was telling me, I want to buy property in La Sierra de la Laguna. Is anyone familiar with Sierra de la Laguna? It is well worth flying over. It's north of La Paz. It's the highest part of Baja Sur, and that's where most of the moisture gets collected because of the monsoons and all that. So they have this beautiful ecosystem that is always green, lush, and there's everything, bird watching, you name it. This person wanted to buy there, and I said, it's not happening. Why not? It's ejido. What is an ejido? I had to explain. But that doesn't mean that you should feel that you are defeated even before you start a journey. What do you mean? Well, what is it that you want property there for? Oh, I want to have room, board, ecotrim. Oh, that doesn't mean that you cannot have a business. You can lease, you know, but invest reasonably. Don't ever invest more than you're willing to lose. As a betting man, you always have to go to a point that you're comfortable with. Don't exceed the threshold, otherwise you pay through a nose. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Couple things. So you mentioned that there's a couple banks that are really bad with Fideicomisos,
Mm-hmm.
like HSBC.
It's costing money for being such a blubbermouth, like remember, right? Jackie Gleason, Rob, and Rafael. That's Rob that we're pretty
So
same.
are there any banks that are good?
Banbajío, Banco Inmobiliario, and there's a couple more, which are more evident down there in Baja Sur, like MIFEL, M-I-F-E-L. And even though I don't know they have someone here, but they will fly someone here. Unlike HSBC. HSBC is pulling out of the Fideicomisos business, as you know. But those people that have Fideicomiso there, whatever happens, they will not have someone here with a power attorney to appear before an notario. And you need to have two signatures, two delegados fiduciarios with a power attorney to legally be able to transact any business, be that assigning of rights or a new trust. So whatever happens, they want it to happen in Guadalajara or in Mexico. And but yes, I have had nothing but success with Banbajío, and they do have a couple offices here in Tijuana. The name of the girl is Sofia. I can later send you her info, but I have her info.
So if you have a Fideicomiso with, say, Bancomer, are you able to transfer it over to another
Of course, it just takes a long time. I have a client who has a property in Punta Chivato, north of Mulegé, and she noticed that someone neglected to advise her when she created the trust that she could name an altered beneficiary in case of her death. So when she noticed that, and I reviewed and confirmed, she said, well, I'll hire you to notify the bank that I want to add my son into the paperwork. So she gave me a paperwork. I fed that to the bank. The bank locally said, oh, no, we have a representative in San Jose del Cabo, that's Baja Sur, Chivato, Baja Sur, send it to San Jose. Speak to Lourdes Salazar. She wasted 2 months and, oh, no, add this, or the KYC is not right. Anyways, and then 45 days of no response, and I keep copying that to Tijuana, Perla Perez, and Rodolfo Gutierrez, which is the delegado for no response. No response. So I get all upset and I go over and say, this is personal? What's the problem? And I'm always, I know I'm direct and I can be confrontational, but I'm trying to do my job. You pay me to do that. They simply take forever. But Banorte is twice as bad. And I already said that I'm not taking any business about Banorte. It's cost me plenty, but I will stand my ground. So HSBC is, I believe we can do more with HSBC than with Banorte. Jose Sosa, yes. And I dealt with him for 10 years. And I created a Fideicomiso for the city of Tijuana, which was a Fideicomiso to pretty much revitalize the downtown area, which was actually not making any money. So we created this business district trying to copy what San Diego's downtown and district areas, Gaslamp and all that, or Little Italy. But we ran out of time when I was with government, because when we turned over the administration, they decided to just dump it. But with Sosa, it took me 2.5 years to get it done, only to, we wasted time. We could have gotten something. But was it Jose Sosa was the bank? I don't know. He said the figure. He's the guy running things here. So he doesn't like me. I don't have a problem. I only have a problem with non-performance. So careful if you're bound to get a Fideicomiso. Like, I've been asked this, is it worth changing Fideicomisos? Is it worth changing banks? Well, it will cost you money to switch banks, okay? It will cost you a commission no less than $500 or more with the bank to be replaced. The new bank will want a permit from the government to replace the fiduciario. You have to pay a permit, which may cost like $1,100. Then you have to pay the bank either a 1-year commission or 2 years, depending which bank. By the way, Scotia Emberlad's not taking no more business. If you have Fideicomiso with them, they may keep it, but they're bound to go the way of HSBC. So careful with Scotia Emberlad. Santander, they're still in the business. But it seems that big banks are phasing out the business and smaller banks are stepping up. So as I was saying, that the bank replacing the current bank will charge a commission to accept the case, which is like $450 minimum with a Bambajillo, and annually paid in advance. That's another $450. That's $900. That's $2,000 plus the notary fees, whatever they are. There's no capital gains because it's not a transaction. You're simply switching banks. Is it doable? Look at this scenario. You may say, no, I'd rather hold on to $2,000 because anyways, I'm still on fixed income, right? So it's gonna take some of my finances away. But if you ever want to entertain the idea of selling property and it takes 12 months, 15 months, that transaction is going to fall through. Do you want to sell? Is it worth investing, $2,000 to lose a transaction? It's just, do your math. I believe that is doable based on that standard. But if you feel like, oh, things are okay, it's eventually it's up to my children, I'll live it. That's a good idea, but just make sure what you're headed to. But if you're selling, you have to consider that it's well worth switching banks, okay? Yes, someone wants to ask a question?
I have a question. Is someone there? About corporations.
I'm not tiring you guys because I can go all day. I have a lot of energy. I'm sorry, but yeah.
But why do people go to getting a corporation, a property?
Oh, okay. That's a very good question. Unfortunately, many of the people that have approached me with a corporation already existing, they are not current with their obligations, tax obligations. Someone told them that, why have a Fideicomiso? You're paying $450 plus this plus the other. Create a corporation is going to cost you, bare bones corporation, $1,500. I charge $5,000 to create a corporation because I give advice. It's expensive. Well, I do earn my money, and people who have hired me to create a corporation know what I'm saying. But you go to a notario. The notario sells tortillas. I'm sorry. I know what is it that I'm saying? How many corporations does he create? Many. Does he personally have the staff? May, but it's not common. they can only give you this much advice, but they will not personalize it to the point that you understand tax issues, state living issues, many concerns that you have. It's not just having a corporation. It's able to keep it. It's able to keep it worthwhile, that is doable, that is productive, the many purposes that you want. But when you wanted it for the Fideicomiso only, these people created a corporation. The corporation bought the property, which become what? An asset. Is no longer a property. Do we agree? It's a corporate asset. But if you fail to pay taxes, what happens? It becomes attached. And then by the time that you die, it may be a little complicated to pass that over to the children, even though you can put it in the will. But if your child is non-Mexican, he has to do what? Go to the Fideicomiso, where you didn't want to be. Now, those that have a Fideicomiso, well, I'm sorry, those that created a corporation, unfortunately, we're told by accountants somehow that they need to create a corporation, buy the property, pay it with a Mexican check from drawn against a Mexican bank for the sake of anti-laundering reasons, and the laws of anti-laundering says that you have to pay with a check drawn against a Mexican bank if the buyer is a Mexican corporation. It's understandable. But the problem is that those people felt, and they were tricked or misadvised, that they could put the company to sleep. And some of them been asleep, no taxes reported for over a decade. Guess what's going to happen when they want to sell? Oh, they had to fix that problem that they kept putting under the rug, and it can get messy because they have to deal with Hacienda, and you don't want to deal with Hacienda. Even my stomach feels bad when I talk about our IRS. It can be suffocating. You have to be careful with what you do and respect the law. Now the law, respect the law. So if you create a corporation, why would you create a corporation? What are you going to save? I don't think you're saving a dime. Tell you why. We already established what it costs to create a Fideicomiso, right? And we're not even talking about legal fees. You pay, what, $1,100 for a permit, one-time fee to create a Fideicomiso for, what, 50 years, okay? And then the bank wants $450 to accept becoming your trustee, and wants an annuity paid in advance for what? $450. You're off $2,000. Now you have Fideicomiso. Me and you, Mexican or not, we all have to go to a notary to legalize transactions on property. So, okay, you created a corporation. What it costs, let's say you pay $1,500. But guess what? You have to make monthly tax reports. You're not going to do it yourself, are you? You're going to have to hire who? A bookkeeper. Is he going to do it for free? No. What is the least he can charge? Let's say, and let's assume for this discussion that he's willing to take $30 times 12. How much is that? $360. You're saving $90, and you're putting yourself in jeopardy. Wouldn't you rather have a Fideicomiso where you have the state planning advantage of you actually passing away with your child not having to go to probate? It does make sense, don't it? So now the other thing is, since you mentioned it, when you buy property, which is 2,001 meters or larger in a Fideicomiso, the government nowadays imposes a clause in the permit to create the Fideicomiso that gets inserted into the trust as a clause that says that if your property is 2,001 to 2,500 square meters, you're bound to invest $250,000 within 24 months or forfeit the property, the investment on behalf of the Mexican government. What did I just say? A man reads this on Facebook on Baja Legal Advice and sends me his Fideicomiso, signed 5 years ago. He's defaulted by 3 years. He has a trailer. He didn't comply with a condition. He said, is that legal? Of course, it's the federal government of Mexico. When they find out, they're bound to take over. But before they do something about it. Comply with that and be quiet about it. They don't have to know that you actually just did that a month ago, do they? So do what's best for you. Don't assume. So the size of the property increases by pretty much, I forget, but I can find out, pretty much like 500 meters, there's a bump up to like $50,000 or $100,000 extra. But if you bought something that is actually built, that's different because the investment's already there. Even though it's not clearly specified, but I've seen contracts where there's a structure already there, which is a home, not just a trailer and a built upon. In that case, you have to be careful when the permit is filed that when it comes out, it doesn't include that, because you will have to elaborate and show that it's already been invested and it's part of the transaction worth. Okay, so there's limitations. So, oh, by the way, before I leave, and I don't know how long have I been at it, almost 12. El Valle de la Ruta del Vino, the city of Ensenada, I don't know when they did this. The city council put this ordinance where they prohibit the sale of property in the Valle, which is less than 5 hectares or 4 hectares, something of the two. Eventually, and I have asked, and I'm going to the city probably tomorrow, filing paperwork to request the rule, the legality of it, and the definition, and to determine what is the region that is bound to do that. What is that I'm saying? You find this nice lot for 1 hectare, and you have an agreement. And those that read me know that I always keep saying the fact that you bought something doesn't mean that you can own it, because owning means what? To be legally able to show proof that you're registered owner with the government. So there's a lot of transactions that hit the wall because they are not complying with the size limitations put out by that city ordinance. So if ever entertain that, don't rely on the real estate agent's word. Oh, that's not a problem. I have this client who's, she's in Todos Santos. She wants to buy property here in Zarco, but it's not in Zarco, it's outside of Zarco. It's not a ejido. She's buying a hectare, and I said, no, the city will not allow it. So guess what the seller suggested? Oh no, we will co-own. Do you really want to co-own? I'm sorry for the term, you're getting in bed with someone that you don't even know? Don't even give him a wet one. I'm sorry. You know, you have to be that clear about things, because his liabilities will be your liabilities will be his liabilities. Do you really want to step into that Claymore Latin field? Of course not. But will they tell you that? You don't know, do you? So you have to ask. Ask as much as you can. Don't deprive yourself of that. That is a common problem with investors that are coming from a culture that is accountable, where there's fact and evidence, and there's protection, and there's insurance, and there's recourse, legal remedies. Unfortunately, my country is devoid of that. So you have to protect yourself. I don't want to scare you. I'm just telling you the facts because you're old enough to take it, I know. But you have to ask. I'm not the only source. I'm just considered to be at the top of my industry, and cocky, I may be so, but I'm 62. I lived, and I've seen, and I have evidence of a lot of things. And I don't know everything. I don't know the end of it. I'm just telling that every case is different. So you have to be watchful. When people hire me, I keep saying, don't sign a dotted line yet. Don't give a deposit. You have to make sure that you do what? Due diligence, that the property exists. Is the guy they raise the owner? The property free and clear? Are the meets and bounds consistent with what he's selling? It's been subdivided. A client of mine buys through Remax, and I'll mention the name, in Puertecitos. He buys this land in Puertecitos, $80,000 cash, brown paper bag, cash. The real estate agent facilitates, puts the contract together, and by the time that my client wanted me to do the Fideicomiso, there were 2 problems. One, the size of the lot, the fact that it was 3,500 square meters, that he had to invest close to $300,000, which he said he would never do. And then the other was the man ran over a pothole on the road, the car flipped and died. And now it's the state. Now that the lady became the executor, she won't subdivide because she says it's up to you. But it's a bigger lot. I just bought this. You paid the subdivision. Oh, guess what? Capital gains. Just I'm not paying capital gains. What happened there? Real estate agent failed to do his job. This happens every day, here, there, and everywhere. So you have to train yourself. You have to educate yourself. You don't have to be an attorney. You just have to ask. In the lease, go over to an notario and ask him. And ask specific questions. Because if you simply say, is there something that I should be concerned about? No. But he's Mexican, he's bound to live and walk over glass. You don't. Don't. Okay? So, I don't know. Have I addressed as much concerns as you had?
As one quick question.
Go ahead.
Do you cover rents like Airbnb kind of businesses, rental businesses?
I haven't been asked to produce a lease like that because that's pretty much provided by the agency itself.
I'm only wondering because I've been
Yeah.
hearing that they're going to tax people on what they did.
Well, see, whatever income you make in Mexico, you have to report. There's people that have an income here and they report to Uncle Sam. They're not doing it right. The U.S. will take the money. The problem is that you're at default here and you're liable here. So you have to remember that there's this treaties between Mexico and the U.S. to avoid double taxation. Whatever tax you pay here, you compensate back home. So yeah, you can have business here.
Restrictions right now, nobody's like checking. So,
Well, actually, they're cracking on it because Airbnb is forcing you to be compliant with, to be aware and to be compliant with. What happens when would you have to register yourself a taxpayer in Mexico? No. Actually, foreigners that have like a single source of income in Mexico, such as that, they have this tax ID number, which is 000 something. It's all zeros. That means that it's a foreigner declaring an occasional income, not like someone like me that is supposed to be reporting every year. A corporation reports every month taxes. An individual has to report taxes, declare taxes once a year. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for watching our video. If you're planning on buying real estate in the Rosarito Beach area, make sure to give us a call. Have a great day.